Since positive psychology is a relatively new field within psychology, correlates of flow remain largely unexplored, despite Csikszentmihalyi outlining the 5 characteristics and 8 major components of flow. Flow is described as a fully immersive experience characterized by peak performance, complete attention on the task at hand, a distortion of temporal reality, and it occurs when the boundaries of one's skill level are met with an equally challenging task. Through my own experiences with diaphragmatic breathing, I have felt that diaphragmatic breathing helps me to become more mindful of the task I'm trying to accomplish, more mindful of turning negative self-talk into positive self-talk, and helps to put me in a more focused, relaxed state of mind. Since diaphragmatic breathing is inherently available to every human being, unraveling how it affects performance could have profound benefits worldwide. Based on associations derived from previous literature, the current study seeks to find the association between diaphragmatic breathing and flow through both qualitative measures of self-perception and quantitative measures of performance. We hypothesize that diaphragmatic breathing prior to resistance training helps to induce flow during stimulus administration and thus improving performance. Studies have also supported the hypothesis of the current study. A study by Ma and colleagues found diaphragmatic breathing to have potential benefits improving sustained attention, decreasing negative affect, as well as reducing the body's physiological response to stress via reductions in cortisol levels. An increase in respiratory depth is probably the most salient physiological effect of diaphragmatic breathing. The study by Manzano and colleagues on the psychophysiology of flow during piano playing found a significant relationship between flow and increased respiratory depth, among other correlates such as lower heart rate and heart pressure. The researchers suggest that during mentally and physically challenging tasks, increased sympathetic activation in tandem with deep breathing and activation of the zygomaticus major muscle could potentially be used as an indicator of flow. Furthermore, a study by Harmit and colleagues support findings by Manzano and colleagues regarding larger respiratory depth on higher levels of flow. However, their medium of achieving flow states was with computer game playing as opposed to piano playing. Lastly, Kaufman and colleagues implemented a combination of mindfulness practices to improve sport performance, while both short-term and long-term mindfulness breathing techniques were used in their study. They suggest that mindful sport performance enhancement was efficacious in improving flow, mindfulness, and other aspects of sport confidence in athletes. The participants included one well-trained Caucasian male, aged 25 to 30, and his skill level was considered to be high. A self-report questionnaire was administered after each set regarding level of perceived focus, level of perceived control, and level of perceived balance between challenge difficulty and skill level, all on a scale of 1 to 5, with 1 being extremely low and 5 being extremely high. The quantitative measure included the weight of resistance administered as well as the number of repetitions performed, in order to find the total volume of weight lifted and the mean volume of weight lifted per repetition. Participants were asked to breathe deeply or not to breathe deeply before half their sets in an alternating fashion, staggered alternatingly between exercises to reduce the effect of fatigue as a confounding variable. Deep diaphragmatic breathing was represented as inhalation for 3 seconds, exhalation for 5 seconds, repeated 3 times, with noticeable abdominal movement in the anterior sagittal plane. After each set, the researcher administered the self-report questionnaire and recorded the number of repetitions. The mean levels of perceived focus, control, and balance between challenge difficulty and skill level were compared in the diaphragmatic breathing and non-diaphragmatic breathing groups. The differences between diaphragmatic breathing and non-diaphragmatic breathing on self-reported perceptions of flow were compared to changes in total volume and volume per repetition. Compared to sets without diaphragmatic breathing, the sets featuring diaphragmatic breathing elicited higher self-reported perceptions of focus by 23.4%, with a mean value of about 4.23 and a standard deviation of 0.4, compared to a mean value of about 3.41 and a standard deviation of 0.5 in the non-diaphragmatic breathing group. The mean amount of focus was higher in every set in the diaphragmatic breathing group when compared to the non-diaphragmatic breathing group. There was a 3.7% increase in self-reported perceptions of control in the diaphragmatic breathing group, with a mean value of about 4.2 and a standard deviation of 0.39, compared to 4.05 and a standard deviation of 0.53 in the non-diaphragmatic breathing group. Despite the slight increase in perceived control, the mean control per set tapered in to be almost identical after the bench press. There was a 13.1% increase in self-reported perceptions of balance between challenge difficulty and skill level, with a mean of 3.64 and a standard deviation of 0.85 in the diaphragmatic breathing group, and a mean of 3.22 and a standard deviation of 0.95 in the non-diaphragmatic breathing group. Like focus, the mean value of self-reported balance between challenge difficulty and skill level was higher in every set in the diaphragmatic breathing group compared to the non-diaphragmatic breathing group. Contrary to the hypothesis, the non-diaphragmatic breathing group actually produced a higher amount of total volume lifted by 6.7%, with 6,375 pounds compared to 5,970 pounds. However, the volume lifted per repetition was 7.9% higher in the diaphragmatic breathing group at 129.8 pounds compared to 120.3 pounds in the non-diaphragmatic breathing group. Furthermore, it can be noted that with diaphragmatic breathing, the participant lifted 255 pounds in the bench press, which is 93% of his 1 repetition maximum for 2 repetitions, and therefore a very challenging task and probably a personal best. The paired non-diaphragmatic breathing set was 245 pounds for 1 repetition, which is 89% of his 1 repetition maximum. Since flow is a phenomenon which occurs at or near optimal performance, it can be postulated that flow was experienced during the 255 for 2, as 4.4 was the highest value for balance between challenge difficulty and skill level in this study. Other noteworthy instances of possible flow were hitting 4 repetitions after hitting 3 repetitions in the incline bench press, and hitting 8 repetitions after hitting 7 repetitions in the weighted dips. Both of these instances were after diaphragmatic breathing. In conclusion, diaphragmatic breathing was associated with higher self-reported levels of perceived focus by 23.4%, control by 3.7%, and balance between challenge difficulty and skill level by 13.1%. The mean volume of weight lifted was also higher in every set in the diaphragmatic breathing group compared to the non-diaphragmatic breathing group by 9.5 pounds or 7.9%. These findings support the hypothesis that diaphragmatic breathing prior to resistance training helps to induce flow during stimulus administration and thus improving performance. As the diaphragm is naturally present in each individual's physiology, every human being has the capacity to practice diaphragmatic breathing. Flow is also a naturally occurring phenomenon and has been shown to be applicable to a plethora of fields, ranging from piano playing to computer game playing to sports and athletics. Essentially, every instance in which a challenging task of appropriate difficulty is matched with an adequate amount of requisite skill, there is an opportunity for the individual to experience flow, be it regarding work, play, speech, social interactions, creative activities through both psychological and physical mediums. Flow does not discriminate. From a strength and conditioning perspective, diaphragmatic breathing can easily be implemented prior to exercise, after exercise, right before maximum exertion of effort, or during instances of high stress, like right before taking a game-winning free throw in basketball. Due to low sample size, the findings of the current study do not represent a causal relationship between diaphragmatic breathing and flow, nor a causal relationship between diaphragmatic breathing and subsequent improved performance due to flow. Although the staggered alternation of breathing pattern was implemented to ameliorate fatigue as a confounding variable, it is not possible to eliminate fatigue as a naturally occurring phenomenon. Future studies are recommended to be conducted with a larger sample size, along with random sampling. In this way, the performance of participants with varied degrees of skill level can be measured to broaden the understanding of if or how diaphragmatic breathing affects performance differently for individuals with different levels of skill. Future studies are also recommended to remove warm-up sets and only to focus on working sets in order to reduce the skew of high repetition sets on total volume.